I want to offer my perspective on just some concerns that I have about this new Gillette ad that's been making the rounds. And I know I really should have shaved for this, but, you know, consider it dramatic irony. Anyway, so there's this new Gillette ad. You can see it. It's called Gillette, We Believe. It's available on YouTube. I'm not going to spend a lot of time summarizing it. Just watch it and come back to me. Now, different people have taken to task different parts of this video. And I want to try to offer my perspective on why I think this is rubbing people the wrong way. You know, different people, I saw one person comment, for example, on the fact that there's a scene in this commercial where this man moves towards an attractive woman to speak to her as she walks by, apparently with the intention of hitting on her, and his buddy stops him and says, man, not cool. Other people have talked about the racial disparity that it overwhelmingly shows white men moving to victimize ethnic minority women, that sort of thing. There are all these different aspects of it. I'll give you an example of one minute problem I have is the scene in the point in the commercial where this guy comes up to a group of women and tells them to smile. I understand that that is haughty and presumptuous and asinine in certain contexts, but I think if you're at a party where everybody's supposed to be having fun and you're sitting there off by yourself with this sad, sour look on your face, it's totally understandable that somebody would come tell you to cheer up or try to brighten you up or something like that. But those are getting into the small particulars of it. I want to get to the philosophical essence of what's wrong with this video. And the reason I want to do that is because there's been a kind of straw response to this video that I don't see as being particularly helpful or proactive. I think there are two camps making this straw response: the people who don't know it's a straw response and haven't fully contemplated the enormity of what's being said or suggested in this video, and the people who know full well the breadth and width of what's being suggested in this video and are choosing to pretend that they don't get it. So I'm speaking to this latter group that might be reachable, might be on the fence. So what is the straw response that I'm referring to? Well, the straw response that I'm referring to is the criticism that is the response, I should say, to the criticism of the video by saying, well, what's wrong with making a video decrying bullying and sexual harassment? What's wrong with this in and of itself? What's wrong with that? And that's the thing. That's not what people have a problem with. If I can only speak for myself, but what I see here is a problem that I see happening a lot on the modern left. And it's something that's going to blunt, as long as it persists, it's going to blunt the goals and the initiatives of the modern left. And that's something I don't feel like I say often enough, that I consider myself a left libertarian politically, but on so many of these things, I'm critiquing from within. Because I understand the validity of the goal. I just don't agree with the way in which it's being approached. And that's crucial. The left totally understands that when it comes to criticisms of the right. For example, if I tell you I am 100% in favor of fighting Middle Eastern terrorism, I just don't agree with the way the George W. Bush White House went about doing it. Or I should say administration went about doing it. Everyone on the left totally understands that. I don't have to clarify, I don't have to explain. They understand my position. They understand that I am in favor of achieving the goal, just not the way this particular organization went about doing it. So that's what we're talking about here. Nobody, I don't think, is suggesting in this discussion that it's somehow okay to bully, or it's okay to harass people, or it's okay to behave like a boorish lad child and all of that terminology that's now codified under the umbrella of toxic masculinity. Nobody's trying to okay that behavior. The problem is in the presumptuousness of the video itself. Most specifically, I'm talking about the scene where we see a long line of men stretching off infinitely into the horizon, all of them standing in front of charcoal grills, chanting, "Boys will be boys," over and over again, while two young boys are fighting each other on the ground in front of them, and they are doing nothing to intervene. And the message, it literally states within the video that this attitude has persisted up until the onset of the Me Too movement. Go listen to the video. That is exactly what they're trying to say. That up until the recent upsurge of the Me Too movement and recent social justice initiatives, that this was the dominant behavior, and it was not being addressed any other way until just now. And pardon me, but that is absolute bullshit. And that's what's disgusting and infuriating about this video, is the idea that men, adult men throughout the generations, have been callously indifferent to raising boys properly until literally about a year ago. That is objectively not true. The canon of human history is rife with examples of advice to men on how to raise their boys, to parents in general on how to raise their children, and so on and so forth. And it's not all good advice, it's not all progressive, it's not all forward-thinking, but we've been working on this since the beginning of time. I mean, what does the Bible say? Foolishness is bound in the heart of the child, but the rod of correction will drive it from him. The Bible is definitely saying that you need to get your kid in line. And that attitude, I'm sure, persisted well before the writing of that passage. It's not anything terribly new, even then. So this idea that somehow men did not act as positive influences in their sons' lives until a year ago is so presumptuous as to be infuriating. And I mentioned that part of this is a problem with the modern left. So why is this a problem with the modern left? Well, I would recommend reading the book White Guilt by Shelby Steele. That book was very revelatory for me in a lot of ways. I try to get as many different perspectives as I can, and certainly reading something by a black American conservative was a real eye-opener. And Shelby Steele made a very, very good point in that book about the hippie generation, the flower power movement in the 60s. And he's talking about race relations specifically. And he talks about how, you had the civil rights movement, and then you had the hippies who showed up and acted like the civil rights movement was this new cool thing that we were all a part of. Groovy, man. Yeah, I'm down with that. And it cheapened it, and it took it from being a legitimate social movement into being a fad. And it opened the floodgates for people who just wanted to exploit the next big thing. That's his larger point. But within that, he offers a very, very insightful sociological analysis about the 60s and the hippie generation. He pointed out that rebellion, childhood, teenage rebellion, is obviously a totally normal part of growing up. You start doing that automatically because you're trying to feel yourself, feel your way around in the world and get your bearings and start to act independently and autonomously, so you start rebelling against your parents. And the problem, he points out, is that this phase is supposed to be temporary. Part of maturing is then realizing that your parents actually do have their shit together. In the book, he quotes Mark Twain, and this is not verbatim, but it's something to the effect of, when I was 14, I thought my father was a fool, but by the time I was 19, I was surprised at how much he had learned. The point being that this is a crucial part of your development. It's not conformity, it's not going along with the man, it's actually growing up and becoming a functioning autonomous individual. Realizing, it's essentially the prodigal son in a way, but it's pushing away from your parents, then maturing in this independent way and coming back and fully reconciling, realizing that they went through this process as well. This is an important part of growing up. And in the 1960s, something very, very strange happened with the modern left. Namely, for the first time, a bunch of young people won their independence from their parents. The idea, the idea of the prodigal son is that you're supposed to, the prodigal son throws two fingers in the air and says, "I'm done with this," and goes off, fucks off to do his thing, and then crashes and burns, comes back, seeing the error of his ways, seeing the wisdom of his father. He now matures into a fuller human being. The left, the modern left in the 1960s won that battle for independence, on a sociological and psychological level. And so, for the first time, the new generation had no way of benefiting from the older generation. And we famously in the 60s, the hippie movement had its "Don't trust anyone over 30" slogan, motto, and everything. So what has been the long-term effect of this? Well, it's been that the cultural discourse coming from the left is this idea that things can only be good if they're new. And conservatives, conversely, have this attitude that things can only be good if they're old. We've lost this ability to work together and communicate with each other to reach new ground. Now we just have old good, new good, and that's it. So when we're hit with these ideas of progress, we are now in this place where we have to pretend that all sociological progress happened since the 1960s. And now that the 1960s hippie generation has entered the geriatric wards, we are now expected to believe somehow that also from the left that all sociological progress began within the last decade or so. And this is absolutely patently absurd. So when this video comes along and suggests somehow that fathers have been indifferent to the upbringing of their sons for the entirety of human existence up until just now, that absurd line of thinking comes from this bizarre occurrence that happened with the hippies, with the Summer of Love in the 1960s, where now we have to literally pretend somehow that there has been nothing good in the canon of human history until just the last couple of generations. Believe it or not, throughout human history, codes of behavior have been taught to men to guide them in how to act towards weaker persons. That is why the most common, most widely used expression of dignity addressing men is gentle man. And that's the real problem with this video. It promotes the idea that men have not been parented or guided towards proper behavior in any way, shape, or form until just now, which is absolutely not true. And if you cannot appreciate the enormous strides that we have made as a society, and by society I mean human civilization, the enormous strides that human civilization has made through the years, through the millennia, through the eons, then you are not going to be able to carry it forward in a positive, dynamic, and proactive way. One of my favorite authors is the Japanese writer Yukio Mishima, who was enamored with the samurai tradition. He wanted to bring back the samurai code of honor and code of conduct into modern Japanese life. A Western analog to that would be the codes of chivalry observed by the Knights of Arthurian legend in that time period and that sort of thing. And these are dismissed frequently as being very strange and backward and that sort of thing, but they actually do instill in men a sense of the importance of not mistreating women, of not mistreating weaker men, of using of essentially the attitude that from great power comes great responsibility, of teaching men to use their strength and their ability for good and for the betterment of those around them and for themselves. This is all there. the reason these ideas seem arcane and outdated is because of the dominant cultural discussion now, which is dominated entirely by the participation trophy attitude of the left. No longer do we teach these values from the perspective of this being something that men should feel honor in participating in, something that builds them up and makes them better, something they can feel proud of, that they can feel builds them up and makes them better human beings. That's not taught anymore. Now, this code of behavior, as is established by what's going on in this Gillette ad and in the wider cultural discussion, is imposed on men as a facet of guilt and shame. You're not doing the right thing because this is bringing out the best in you and making you into a person you can be proud of, and your friends and family and everybody around you can be proud of. Instead, you're doing the right thing because, oh, you're a shit human being just like all these other shit human beings, and you need to be you need to be doing this out of a sense of shame, out of a sense of servile, wormy awareness of your own worthlessness and frailty. That's the difference when these codes of values are, when the participation trophy generation tries to impart these codes of value. That's what's happening. I just mentioned Yukio Mishima. If you're about to tell me that his attitudes were far too backwards and reactionary for the modern world, stop and think about something. I would advise you to go read a short story of his called Swords. It's in his collection Acts of Worship. Swords is this depiction of a young man, an athlete, a martial artist, who is sort of portrayed as being this ideal paragon of masculinity in a lot of ways. And there's a scene in the story where some of the boys from this, was it Kendo, the wooden sword thing? I'm making an idiot of myself describing it that way, I know. But this Kendo class, this team, they are eating at this restaurant, and some young women are coming out of their bathroom and the restroom in the back of the restaurant, and a bunch of really boorish lad culture kind of guys, fraternity boy types, turn around and start shouting at the girls as they're coming out of the bathroom, saying obscene things to them, whistling at them, all of that sort of thing. And the main character, the protagonist of this story, if you will, stands up and he goes over there and he tells the boys that were just shouting at the women, go get in the bathroom. Go do it. Get in the bathroom. You're bringing dishonor on your school. You're bringing dishonor on these women. Get in the bathroom now. And so these guys, suddenly very afraid, go in the bathroom and wait in there for a minute. And the guy says, okay, come out. And when he comes out, when the guys come out of the bathroom, the entire restaurant, the main character leads the entire restaurant in jeering and shouting at these boys and putting them through what they went through with the girls, or what they put the girls through. I don't think that anyone on either side has a problem with that kind of comeuppance being laid upon such boorish, disgusting, disreputable young men. The question is, are you doing it because it's speaking to your better nature, or are you doing it because you're a wormy little servile toad that has, as Shelby Steele pointed out, co-opted social movements, the forward progress of society, as a kind of cool, trendy thing to be a part of? That's what this Gillette ad is speaking to, and that's what we have to be aware of. And that's the real problem with this video. It promotes the idea that men have not been parented or guided towards proper behavior in any way, shape, or form until just now, which is absolutely not true. And if you cannot appreciate the enormous strides that we have made as a society, and by society I mean human civilization, the enormous strides that human civilization has made through the years, through the millennia, through the eons, then you are not going to be able to carry it forward in a positive, dynamic, and proactive way. So that is what I see as being the central problem in this Gillette ad.